Welcome to By the Books, the podcast helping business owners navigate the complex world of business, tax, and bookkeeping. Now, to the owner and president of Secline, Lindsay Klein.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. This is Lindsay Klein with Secline, honest, accurate bookkeeping performed on time, and your host of By the Books. I'm here today with Zach Pritchard. Did I say it right?
Yes.
Perfect. You're with All Around Coaching, consulting with businesses to help with culture and communication. Thanks for joining me today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So, how did you get into this? What got you started down this trajectory of helping with culture and communication?
So I mean, back all the way up to college, I have a bachelor's in wildlife management degree, which is not related at all. But it got me into the world of, I spent 9 months trying to find a job with Parks and Wildlife, didn't find one, so I took a job in Prosper with a company called Pond Medics. We did pond and lake management across the DFW Metroplex. And so when we did, as we were building that company, I started helping hire, started helping building the team, the culture, and that sort of thing. So when I first started, there was 3 of us, and then in the 6 years there, we lost a few, gained a few, but when I left, there was 12, and so I had a lot of hand in that growing stage of building the team, developing the team, hiring the right people, and struggling to find the right people, as a lot of business owners are now. And so that's what kind of got me into business world, small business side, and so I just found a real love and passion for that culture aspect, and really doing a lot to create a way that people would stay, a way that, or something that keeps them here at our company. And of course, it's a big thing, job satisfaction. Everybody wants to stay and kind of have that security. So that's something that was real a passion for me. So when and we'll talk a little bit about it here in a little bit, but the issues that we had at that company and why I left is what now has got me into my own business doing. I started with financial coaching, helping people do personal budgets and stuff, just the personal behavior around finances. But then I kept drawing into that culture side with the communication stuff. Started writing a book on the communication, and that's kind of what pulled me into that culture.
So you've authored a book now.
It is being published soon.
Okay, what's going to be called?
Even Impact.
Even Impact. Okay. And did you ever think that you would be authoring a book? Has that always been a dream of yours?
No, it's never.
No? Really?
It hasn't been a dream of mine at all. So even in high school, I was the guy that didn't read at all. I did Cliff Notes, and even then I halfway did it at that point. So I was barely skipping by in English class. That was not my thing.
Interesting. So how do you go from being a kid who doesn't read, hates English, to now writing a book and helping people with communication?
So it all started with 2 things. A book the first book I read cover to cover was Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover in college. I just had a baby in college, and so I was like, man, I got to get this figured out. I was watching everybody else struggle. I was struggling, so I read his book, and it changed my whole mindset of not just finances, but everything. And so I started listening to his podcast and his stuff at the time. And one of the quotes that he said, or that he had on there, that was Charlie Tremendous Jones, and he says, "You'll be the same person in 5 years as you are today, except for the people you meet and the books you read." And so that one, it just lit. The people you meet and the books you read. That's pretty impactful. It lit a fire in me to read and learn from people. And so it got me on this personal growth path, I guess you'd call it. And I'm on fire with it now. So,
interesting.
So after that, I've read books. Every month I'm reading something. So
nice. What are you in the middle of right now?
Well, I'm rereading Dave Ramsey's EntreLeadership book. We do a book study every week, and we kind of read a chapter and go over it. So I'm rereading that. I just read a book on how to get published.
Oh, nice.
Which is kind of ironic, but helping me kind of lay out that book launch and get that going. And so I'm reading that as well.
So the name, Even Impact, how did you come up with that name? What does it mean?
So when I was looking at doing the book, I had this I started laying out what I thought maybe I could put in it. And one of the things I told my wife I was going to write a book, and she laughed at me a little bit. And so it just made me even more, motivated to do it. But so I kind of laid out all the stuff that I thought would kind of fit in there. And the important things were like expectations, verbal and nonverbal communication. The empathy one was a big one for me, because that's what a lot of my team was at the time was saying, that I didn't have empathy, and I'm like, that's not what I meant. So how was I giving? What message was I sending that I wasn't intending to send?
Interesting.
And so that's what kind of got.
Do you feel like you figured that out?
I mean, I'm more aware of it. Is it figured out completely? No, because I still send messages that I don't intend to. And I don't know that'll ever change, but it's that process of seeing the disconnect when you're talking to somebody and going, okay, I need to clarify that now, rather than waiting until it blows up.
Do you have a good example of where you've had issues with that?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of the ones that I guess from an empathy standpoint is, just recently, this weekend, I'm not the guy that, I don't know if y'all have heard of Patrick Lencioni, but the Working Genius. He talks about a little different personalities in the workspace, but he's got one that's called enablement, which is kind of my connection to that empathy side of me. And so it's the mom of the group. It's the one that always likes to help people, and they're always asking, how are you doing? How are you feeling? So that's that empathy. They're wanting to listen to your story and your plan. So, but even just this weekend, we're sitting, my wife's gone out of town, so I'm taking my kids to a birthday party. And we get all the way up to the birthday party, and my daughter tells me 10 minutes before we get there, and it's neighbors, so we're walking up to the house, and she's like, oh yeah, Mom told me to remind you that we were supposed to get a birthday gift for the birthday party. I'm like, oh yeah, that'd be right. And I'm like, as an adult, I'm sitting there like, why am I not thinking, I'm going to a birthday party, I need to have a gift to take to this 3-year-old birthday party? It never dawned on me. I don't know why. So it's just one of those, like, that's that empathy side. Like, she's always thinking about that type of, like, giving and helping somebody. And I'm just like, apparently I'm oblivious to it a little bit. But I've laughed at it all weekend since. I'm just like, I don't understand what was going through my mind to not think about that it's a birthday party. You're supposed to walk in with a gift.
How has that played out with, let's say, coworkers or subordinates when you're talking to them?
Right. So, everybody wants to be understood or heard, right? And so if you don't take the time to let people talk, then they always feel like you're just overpowering them, and that your ideas or your opinions matter more than anything, which, I mean, your opinion and voice matters, but if you don't give them the chance to let theirs come out and then say, I'll take that into consideration, we'll talk about it, and then kind of move it from there. If you just blow it off, or even if you don't mean to, a lot of times I'm that way. So if they give me an idea and I'm already saying, I've already been there, that doesn't work, it's not going to work, they still want to be heard. They still want to know that message or that idea has been taken into full consideration, really. So just being able to, kind of sit and talk, at least let them talk a little bit. I'm in a meeting every week with the company that the owner wants to kind of spit his opinion in all the time, and it almost interrupts everybody else. And so it kind of aggravates people. They're not like, I can't get a word in. So it's that mentality. If we could just, as owners or managers or leaders, just kind of sit back and let people speak. It's kind of the idea of, if you're sitting in a round table trying to brainstorm about a problem that you're having in the company, if you'll let everybody else talk first and then you chime in, and give your opinion at the end, it lets them know that they matter a little bit, and you care about their opinion. Because if you're going to throw out your idea first, everybody else is going to be like, I don't want to go against that, and they won't
Right.
give their full opinion.
Right. That makes sense.
So that's some of the examples and scenarios that I've seen.
I've been having this probably a very similar issue with my 16-year-old daughter. I have more of a masculine personality, so my tendency is when someone presents a problem, it's like I go into fix-it mode. Like, okay, just do X, Y, Z, problem solved, move on. But when my daughter's coming to me with an issue, she'll tell me, because I go into fix-it mode, Mom, I don't need you to fix it.
Right.
You know? So I have to kind of reel that in and be more conscious of, okay, when she's presenting a problem or, you know, just wants to vent, it seems like more than anything, I'm trying to be more cognizant of she just wants a sounding board, which I don't really, I mean, I get it, I guess, to some degree, but at the end of the day, I'm a problem solver.
Right.
Like, we've got a problem, let's fix it. Like, how are we going to make this not a problem anymore? Like, to me, that's the point of dealing with the problem, right? It's coming to a foregone conclusion.
Right.
But I've realized not everyone's wired that way. So I'm having to learn to be more empathetic, as you were referring to, and I'm just going to listen and bite my tongue and be a sounding board so that she feels heard.
Right. And that's a lot of times as coworkers, that's all they want to do. I mean, even a manager, a leader, they tend to vent sometimes to somebody. And especially if they vent to me, I'm already going, okay, how do we fix this? I'm the same way. So, and that's where the personality aspect is, we kind of see, is the personality does play a role. And so when we get into sending and receiving messages, you've heard the term, it's not what you said, but how you said it. Right?
Yeah.
I like to add, it's not what you heard, but how you heard it. So there's two sides of that, right? I mean, if I'm sending you a message, I have my own tone, my own words, my personality, and the mood that I'm in, but so does the receiver. So they've got their tone that they're hearing, the tone that the words that they've heard, which may be different.
Right.
I may say a word and you hear a different word. It's like the telephone game. It starts at the beginning and never ends the same. So somebody missed, and we probably missed hearing it a little bit all the way down.
Right.
And it turned out to be something different. So that's really the goal, is to make sure that message sent matches the message received, tone and all. And the personality plays a big role in that, because on that Working Genius from Patrick Lencioni, he talks about there's the wonder and idea people, which I'm an idea guy. Like, I'm a problem solver. I'm gonna think, could we do this better? Is there a different way of doing this? And then I'm gonna come up with an idea. Now, somebody else will take that idea and go, okay, that's not gonna work. My wife in particular tells me how many bad ideas I have, because I can have a lot of them, which 98% of them are probably not very good, but that's why I just keep pumping them out, and she'll tell me which ones are good.
Stuff like the double-decker couch from the Lego movie.
Right. So it's definitely one of those, like, I have 100 ideas a day, and she'll turn down most of them, and she's my sounding board. And so she's more of a discerner in that personality role, where she's not she doesn't do much of the idea stage, but she more takes the idea and can make sure it's going to work or not.
Right.
But that can also come across as criticizing, because it's like, well, that was my idea. Like, I like my idea, and you're telling me it's not a good idea. So it can draw a little bit of aggravation if all of my ideas are bad, which they may be. She's probably right in most of them. But it's me having to realize that she's not attacking me. She's just attacking the idea and saying that the idea needs some work. Maybe the overall idea has some value, but we need to kind of mold it into something that's really going to work a little better. And so that's kind of how we work a lot. And even at home with the home stuff, it's, I know how to, I know when she's talking to me, I can trust her. And part of the, one of the acronyms in the title is trust. And so I trust her enough to know that she's not attacking me. She's not trying to make me mad. She's just that, I can trust that. And so it allows us to have that conversation, that open communication, where I'm not getting aggravated and then lashing back.
Right.
And then you get in that cycle. It's just hard to get out of, especially even at work too. It's the same thing.
So one thing I've noticed, On this podcast, I've talked quite a bit about emotional intelligence, which is a subject I've recently did more of a deep dive in. I've noticed with people that I've identified as having less EQ, there tends to be a tendency to take what somebody says that may have not even been meant as any type of criticism. And it's like in their head, there's some kind of filter that turns it into criticism of themselves. And whenever they repeat what you said back, it's completely different. And it's altered in such a way where now they're saying, so basically I'm an idiot, or, something very self-deprecating, which is not what was said at all. It was just whatever was said was then changed with that cognition. So have you encountered that? And how do you get past that barrier when clearly this person has a negative self-narrative?
Right.
And everything that filters in then comes and becomes skewed in that direction. How do you get around that?
Right. It's a challenge. I mean, and it's something that it's not a flip of a switch. You can't just, fix it and move on. It's something it's growth. It's that developmental growth that you need. And this is kind of what we do for businesses, is go in and do this monthly so that they have that time to apply some of the things they're learning. But from that standpoint, I mean, that's a big aspect to why those messages aren't received, because you have a team of people with all different confidence levels. And if one person has low self-esteem, low self-image, low confidence, they're going to take everything as criticism. And you're the most critical boss ever. And you may be the nicest boss ever, but you're so critical, and so you're basically telling them they suck and they don't do their job well, which you're just asking questions. You're just trying to figure out what's going on, but they're taking it that way, like you're saying, because of that emotional intelligence.
So how do you get through that barrier?
I think you got to open that door of letting them see what the facts are. I mean, and just having that conversation. This is not my intention to make you feel criticized. It's my intention to help you and develop you. But too many times, managers and leaders just walk away from that conversation, hoping they'll eventually either figure it out or they'll leave. But I'm in the business of developing people, and if you've got a team, you're in the business of people. I mean, business is I don't care if you're the sole proprietor, you're still in the business of people. You have a set of clients, you have a set of people that help you in your business, whether it's a website guy or your vendors or whoever it is. You're still in the business of developing relationships. So at some level, you've got to handle some of those conversations. And I think a lot of people, they push people away that could be really great if you would just spend a little bit of time with them. And especially with somebody that's a little lower or emotional intelligence, that, like you were saying, maybe they didn't have someone that would step in and have that conversation. Because a lot of times they just need to know, hey, what is my intention? Because it's making them feel criticized. But if we can come in and talk about that and have that open conversation, open, honest conversation, and just talk what we feel. Feelings aren't, they're feelings. I mean, you can't say you shouldn't feel that way. I mean, that's not, I mean, a lot of people do, but it's like, well, it's not my intention to make you feel that way. So I can do what I can do to maybe speak differently to you, maybe ask more questions rather than be more direct. But then again, you've got to be able to hear it differently and at least know that that's a possibility. So that's really the goal. And it's not going to change after one conversation. You're just going to have to continue to make sure that you're having those open, clear, honest conversations so that you can eliminate that disconnect and that miscommunication.
So in helping companies improve culture, I would think that if you can help individuals with their self-esteem and having a more positive self-narrative, that would improve the culture as a whole. What are some ways that leaders can do that?
Well, I mean, funny you say that. I mean, I just launched a online course program that one of my courses is personal growth, and it's all about self-confidence, self-esteem, self-image, because it does matter. And I face this a lot as the imposter syndrome. You know, as I started writing the book, it's like, who am I to write a book? Like, I almost failed English multiple times, and And I'm still not very good at grammar, so I've got to have other people looking at it to make sure it's editing and stuff. So you still face that imposter syndrome and the confidence issues, and that's what sales is all about. And so it is, if we can get people to kind of be more confident in themselves and who they are and not worry about what other people think, then the workplace will be simpler, I say, in the sense of not as much drama, not as much arguing and fighting, more working together. And that's the whole point of a culture, is to work together to make, more money for everybody and more satisfaction, not just the money side. But if you can go to work and you love your job, you love your team, who wouldn't want that?
Right.
And so I think that's where, I'm building those courses to help individuals in those companies, because just like you said, if you've got a team of 10 and you can get all of them to be more confident in what they're doing and not assume they're being criticized, then they'll work better. They'll work more confident. And then the work is more quality, more efficient, and you've got more work getting out the door, and more customers are happy, more money's coming. It's just an all-around good situation. So I told you I started this with financial coaching, and the idea was to get into businesses, and because what I did in Prosper was teach these guys personal finance, because I saw them making a lot of mistakes in the field because their mind was, can I make my mortgage payment Friday, or can I make my car payment on Friday? So helping them do a lot of personal finances was in result was supposed to help them be less distracted at work, and they would work more efficiently, work harder, and do more for the business. And it would also help them as well. So it's not just personal and work life is not separated. I know for the years people are trying to say, just hang your stuff at the door, all your personal stuff, leave it at the door and work. Well, everything's in here, so it's hard to hang it on the door.
Absolutely.
You can set it aside a little bit, but you're still thinking about it.
Right.
And if you got a hard work home life, it's going to affect how you receive messages at work. So, but that's the goal, is to get people. I think the challenge, or the application side of it would be to start small. What is something I can be confident in today, and then work your way into it. So what I did to help me was I started doing a to-do list weekly, so that I kind of lay it out what I wanted to do for the week, for the business, for personal, whatever it is. And then at the end of the week, and I'm like constantly looking at that every day. And then at the end of the week, I do a review and say, okay, how much of that did I get done? Was it 80%, 90%? And it wasn't hey, I didn't get all of it done. Then it didn't tear me down to not get all. I wasn't expecting to get all of it done. So I'm expecting to get a majority of it done. And then you got to be honest and say, did I not get this done because I just said screw it, or was there reasons that I was busy and other things came up? So it's really being honest with yourself and that self-talk. We have a lot of these conversations in our head, or at least I do. And that's how we can, if we have better self-talk against ourselves, because that person that has low emotional intelligence also has negative self-talk. They're criticizing themselves. And so if you're criticizing yourself, that's how you hear everything. Everything is. And
right.
I'm a lot that way. Like, I've had to fight through that as I've started this business, and I feel like I'm bothering somebody trying to make a phone call, and they're like, oh man, thanks for calling me, thanks for staying up and following up with me, I've been busy. And so I'm like, oh, maybe they weren't bothered, and it was all me telling me that I'm bothering them. So I'm sending myself the wrong message. So if it starts there, and so you've got to be able to start talking to yourself better, like you would want other people. Put
right.
yourself in their shoes,
right.
and then assume what they're trying to figure out what they would say.
So I've been doing a lot of reading about brain chemistry. Our dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, oxytocin, all those things that keep us motivated and happy, right. and keep our anxiety and depression down, and all of that. And specifically on my journey, how it relates to my food, my unhealthy relationship with food. That's how I got started on that trajectory, and then realized that this is a brain chemistry issue. What's fascinating to me in learning about this is how much our body chemistry, our brain chemistry gets thrown off by our own self-narrative.
Right.
And how our negative thoughts about ourselves, basically our body is sabotaging itself. Like it's almost like a predestined, like you're setting into motion an attack of your own self in a very tangible way.
Right.
And it's essentially increasing those stress hormones, decreasing those good hormones that make you feel good about yourself. So it's like you're perpetuating it then, you know, because now you feel even worse about yourself.
Feeding the fire.
Yes. And I was talking to someone the other day that put it a really good way. She was saying, you know, when you start forming those pathways in your brain, it's like when you see it through snow, you know, somebody driving through snow and everybody's going through the same path because it's the path of least resistance, right? And it's then a deep groove and everyone's going to continue following that path. It's the same thing with our brains, she was saying, is that we have these thought patterns that are common. We're used to them, right? It's now created a pattern that we commonly follow. It's the path of the least resistance and how we now see everything, you know?
Right.
And she was saying to actually change our thought pattern, it's now you're going down a much harder path.
Right.
You're now setting a new pathway. No one has treaded that way before, so it's new snow instead of the packed snow that you're used to treading. And so I thought that was a really interesting analogy in explaining how difficult it is in practice to change the way you think. And it's not something that happens with a snap of a finger.
Right.
Like it has to be conscious and it takes effort. And you've got to catch yourself because inevitably at some point you're going to catch yourself going down that path of least resistance. And you have to stop and say, like, correct yourself, like correct the path.
Right.
So have you had any experience with that or thoughts about that specifically?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's got to be intentional. I mean, I remember thinking at one point, I was like, well, that's just how I think. You're just going to have to get over it. And then it's like, I start realizing, well, no, that's not right. I have to, you know, I may think that at one point, but I can change the way I think. And again, it's not a flip of a switch. And so, but you have to be intentional. It's just any goals, any weight loss journey you're trying to be on, like it takes intentionality. So does the personal growth. And I think a lot of people kind of let the personal growth aside because they think it's just going to happen naturally. And it may a little bit, but everybody's moving. I mean, nobody's staying the same. You're going to lose some or you're going to gain some. And so I want to be gaining. Right. And I want to make, basically, a lot of my mission is to make sure that everybody, if they know what their potential is, how do we close that gap from where they're currently performing to where their potential says they can perform? And so what is that gap, number one? What are those things you need to work on? So one of the things that I think would be beneficial for everybody, and I built the courses so that they can kind of start that process, but I would highly recommend finding a mentor or coach, someone they can meet with weekly and just talk about it. Talk about what they're struggling, what's going on in their head, because that's what's helped me. I mean, I still meet with a coach every week, or a mentor, and we walk through some of these mental negative thoughts that I'm having, and he's like, where are you getting that? He's kind of showing me the facts of, I'm going to lay out everything that goes against what you just said. You're this person, this person, this person, and just because somebody said something else and you took it that way, now you're, it's adding fuel to my negative fire. So if, you're self-critical, then when your wife says something, your spouse says something to you, then it's just more fuel to that fire. And so you've got to be able to say, because there's times where we get frustrated. We get in the moment, we're like, you never answer my phone call, or you never do this for me. And the reality is never. Like, I never do that, right? I mean, so, but when she says that, it's like, okay, yeah, I never do that. Now I'm criticizing myself for it when it's not true.
Well, and that brings up a good point, is words matter. So when communication, being really careful about how we're presenting something and avoiding words that are never always, which is a very broad stroke.
Right.
And almost never true.
Right.
So I've been catching myself at that too, because I'm really trying to make a concerted effort to make sure that what I'm saying is literally true. Like maybe saying generally speaking before you start your assertion, right? So you're putting out there, I know this doesn't apply to everyone. And that goes a long way to helping people not feel defensive.
Right.
Because whenever you use that always, or, put a whole box of people into one, like men or women, right? Sometimes that comes up like, oh, well, men always do this or women always do that. Then
throw up a red flag
you
right
put
there.
everybody in a box now, and the person that doesn't apply to is sitting there and they're offended, right? So I've tried to get better about using things like, well, generally speaking, or sometimes.
And that's where I talk a lot about what I call pre-communication. Like, if you know a message may come across wrong or differently, then basically pre-communicate something. Say, I'm not intending this message to be critical. This is just informational, whatever it may be, but have some sort of statement before you go to send that message, so that you kind of disarm them, just like like you were saying. So there's a book called Persuasion by Robert Cialdini, and this is where I got the pre-mentality. Is he talks about he has a story in there where he goes into a mall and they're going to do a survey, and they're going to ask 100 people to help them with this survey. So they go in and they ask and say, can you help me with this survey? And they ask 100 people. They get 20% people to say yes. But then the next day he goes back into the same mall and does the same thing, except that he asked them a pre-question first. And he asked them, do you consider yourself a helpful person? And they say, most people are going to say yes, right? And so then he follows up. He's like, okay, well, can you help me with this survey? So you kind of put them on spot in a sense. So it's, a little bit of manipulation of that to get that. But they went from 20% to 90%.
Wow.
So it's that mentality of that persuasion.
So what is the psychology behind that? Is it that we ultimately don't want to be seen as hypocrites?
Right. We tell this person, we just told this person I'm a helpful person. Now he's asking for my help. The question that a lot of times we have is, well, what does help mean? I've done this in training. Is I'll ask the whole room and say, hey, will y'all help me with something? Everybody's like, maybe.
Yeah, it depends on what it is.
Depends on what. And so one person's like, oh yeah, I'll help you no matter what. And I'm like, okay, let's go. We're gonna go help me move. And like, maybe not. So it all depends on what that definition is. And so that's the challenge, though. But in reality, they at that moment, they don't want to be seen. They just said they're helpful. They don't want to be now saying I'm not helpful.
Right.
There's some of those bold people, the 10% that are like, yeah, I ain't doing that. So you can get over it. But I've always liked that, because it really just shows kind of where, what you can do before that message, before any kind of sales meeting, trying to eliminate some of that disconnect.
Well, and in that example that you gave, that could really be portrayed probably as manipulation.
Right.
I'm assuming you're not talking about manipulating people. So where would that play out, let's say, in a staff meeting? A leader gets up to present something, and maybe it's even a tough topic. Maybe they're having to make what's going to be perceived as a negative announcement.
Right.
What would you do to soften that blow?
And so first we want to look at, I think, manipulation, it has this negative connotation to it. But in reality, it's just changing something, right? There is a negative side of manipulation. And the difference would be that manipulation is it's more of a selfish thing. It's all about me. I'm manipulating you to fit me. When we're leading a team and we're in that meeting, you're still trying to change their mindset around your topic. And so, is it manipulation? Well, maybe a little bit, but it's not your scrupulous, selfish manipulation that we all think about. So, and most people call it motivational interviewing, and that's one of my characteristics in the book, is motivational interviewing. If you've ever been in kind of a behavioral school or something for kids, they use that term, and they train the workers on that, because you're trying to get these teenagers to accept the way of life that we want them to accept, that's better for them than what they've been through, but it's got to be their idea. And so you're trying to ask them questions. Wouldn't this be better to do it this way or that way? And so you kind of have to make it their idea, not mine. But the result is it's better for them.
Have you ever seen that movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding?
It's been a long time, but I think I've seen it.
I love the quote from the mom in that movie. And they're trying to figure out how to get her husband to agree to let their daughter go to college.
Right.
He was very traditional, had a very traditional view of how women should be, and college was not part of it. And so the daughter's really worried that they're not going to talk him into it. And I'll never forget that quote from the mom. She said, "The man may be the head, but the woman is the neck, and she turns the head any way she wants." It just reminded me of that.
That's funny.
That I don't even remember that much about the movie, but that is classic.
Right.
Well, how can people find you if they would like to reach you and maybe get some help with this communication and culture?
Right. My website's under construction at the moment, but they can give me a call at 214-843-4770. I'll be happy to answer any calls and come sit down with them and see how I can help.
You want to throw an email out there? Is there a place people can email you?
Right. It's Zach, ZACH, at all-aroundcoaching.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
And I'm Lindsay Klein with Klein, honest, accurate bookkeeping performed on time, and your host of By the Books. Our website is sakline.com, SAKLINE.com, and you can email us at info@sakline.com. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Until next time, have a great week.
By the Books is presented by Sakline, honest, accurate bookkeeping performed on time. For more information on Sakline services or to get a hold of Lindsay, visit sakline.com or email info@sakline.com.
The information provided on this website and podcast does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. Instead, all information, content, and materials available are for general information purposes only. Information provided by Sakline may not constitute the most up-to-date legal or other information. Listeners should contact their attorney to obtain advice with respect to any particular legal matter and should refrain from acting on the basis of this information without first seeking legal advice from counsel in the relevant jurisdiction. Only your individual attorney can provide assurances that the information contained herein and your interpretation of it is applicable or appropriate to your particular situation.